Good morning. It's Thursday. What a week. Today's lead story is here, and it's about how the Supreme Court yesterday overturned an effort by the Trump administration to pause foreign aid payments to the tune of about $2 billion. For context, $2 billion is about 175th of Elon Musk's net worth. It's probably less than he will have lost on the stock market over the last 2 days, thanks to the tariffs on Mexico, China, and Canada. But he could pick it up if he had to. Anyway, it's not about the money that taxpayers are going to manage to keep. It's a 5-4 emergency ruling. Now, what's really interesting in the US is that people tend to trust lawyers. We sort of see them as a bit like doctors. They're the people who save society. And I think most Americans are expecting the Supreme Court to come to the country's assistance when it comes to unconstitutional acts. The trouble is that the Constitution is also policed by people. These judges are selected by different presidents. And thanks to the polarization of the country over recent years, depending on who picked you, you're more likely to lean one way or the other, as Blondie sang. What's really interesting is that one of the conservative judges and the chair of the court yesterday ruled in favor of plaintiffs to this lawsuit. Some nonprofits and some recipients of this foreign aid had argued that because the aid was given by the Biden administration, it was unconstitutional for Trump to basically try and walk it back now. They won, but only by one vote on the Supreme Court, and by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who is today on the wrong end of some really nasty MAGA stuff. There is a tweet going around that shows her reaction to Trump as he walks past, and she looks like she's swallowed a wasp. Evidently, she's not happy with him personally. Now, we're scrutinizing a woman's expression in power. That's not uncommon, whereas men get away with falling asleep in Congress, and we don't really worry about it. So there's some sexism in that scrutiny. But I would say it looks like she may have a conscience after all, or at least be focused on the Constitution. Justice Samuel Alito, meanwhile, and his friends Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and the other one, what was his name? The guy who was accused in his hearings of probably sexually assaulting a young woman when he was a teenager. Brett Kavanaugh, charming. Those four men wrote a scathing 8-page dissent to the majority ruling. They effectively said that a lower court shouldn't have the right to tell the government how to follow the Constitution, and that they're the arbiters of truth. Thing is, what I see is that the Supreme Court is really a political institution at this time. The politicization of the Supreme Court is not a good thing. And indeed, if you look at some of the rulings in the last 4 years since a conservative majority took over, they are intent on stamping their interpretation of the Constitution on the US, particularly when it comes to abortion, but the rights of farm workers to unionize. You know, there's a bunch of stuff. If you want to read the newsletter that I put out every morning, it's at Beehive. It's Matt Davis Reads the Newspaper at beehive.com. And there's a link in there to the worst recent Supreme Court rulings if you really want to be depressed. What's interesting and what's not interesting? Justice Samuel Alito, last May, outside his house, he flew a flag that says "An Appeal to Heaven" on it. Now, he blamed his wife for flying this flag, but the thing is, that flag is all about basically saying, wouldn't it be great if the US went to more religious interpretation of the Constitution? Now, the Constitution is a document that was written by slave owners in the, 1800s, I believe. I don't even know when this country was founded, and I don't really care. It was intended as a guiding document to make sure that no one was a jerk or, say, a Nazi. And yet, when you take over the Supreme Court, when you start kind of messing with the separations of courts and state and congressional branch, you start muddying the waters. That flag that was flying outside Justice Alito's house, which he blamed his wife for flying, by the way, it's not a great vibe for someone who's supposed to be neutral. It's more like a sort of dog whistle to suggest that, hey, I'm with you guys. And at a time when we really are seeing kind of the wholesale takeover of organs of government by people with very strong right-wing agendas, it gives me pause. Meanwhile, Justice Clarence Thomas has a friend whose signed copy of Mein Kampf adorns his home in Texas. These are not guys to mess with. They are hard right men, and they so happen to be justices on the Supreme Court. Now, I think that we should be upholding the institutions of government, but we also need to hold them to scrutiny. And that's why we read the newspaper together here every morning. I appreciate you being with me. Thank you for reading the newspaper with me. And please do talk about this with your friends and family. For now, it's good that the Supreme Court upheld the Constitution, albeit by a majority of 1.